Not kidding. My neighbor left his gate open, so we're stopping the cows that are actually in. You go back. You go back. You go back. You go back. You go back.
All right, y'all. Thank you for tuning in to Dixieland the Proletariat. We're going to talk about Southern working class history and current events through a leftist perspective. Make sure to like us on social media at Dixieland the Proletariat or Dixie Prol. If you want to give your wages to a bunch of rednecks, then subscribe to our Patreon page at patreon.com/DixieProl. Got a lot of cool stuff to give you, including CDs, stickers, and a cookbook eventually one day. This podcast is brought to you by Newport 100s in a Box, Camel Silvers, Black Coffee, Vaping, the Living Room Couch, and donations from viewers like you. Shout out to all our subscribers on Patreon. Our monthly Patreon surplus goes to groups that are run by and or help marginalized people directly. As always, I'm Nelson with Senior Telecommunications Director Tommy, Comrade Kate, Brother William, and our guests this evening are Memphis-Midsouth DSA. How is everybody doing?
Tired and in pain, but good. In good spirits.
I'm really, really tired, running on fumes right now.
I feel you. That sounds horrible. I'm not gonna lie. That sounds absolutely horrible.
It's a good kind of pain.
On a total stroke of irony, there he goes. I was about to say I can't unmute Will, and usually he's the one that needs to be muted the most. But all right, y'all. So how's everybody else doing? We apparently the restaurant I work at is still not abiding by social distancing. We had a 10 to 12 top party come in. We're only supposed to legally have up to 8, and owner doesn't care about social distancing with the tables, and no one wears a mask except for people that work there. So yeah, that's always fun. And Montgomery now has the highest rate of cases in Alabama, right?
Well, Nelson, you don't have that elite blood, so you're more susceptible
Oh my God,
to that coronavirus.
Oh, like the episode before this, when it comes out, it's that when that dude said that, in all seriousness, that white people could not get the coronavirus because of some genetic bullshit.
By that dude, he means a member of Identity Europa who is currently a biology professor at the University of Alabama at Birmingham.
Yep.
So, like a white supremacist science teacher told black students that white people can't get coronavirus. Yeah, we're kind of in the same boat in Memphis. We were supposed to enter stage 3 of reopening on Monday, and on Monday it was also reported an additional 256 cases in just Shelby County alone. I went and did the math, and the state of Tennessee has 7 times as many cases as Northern Ireland alone. Don't know why I picked Northern Ireland. Wink, wink. Yeah, no. So we're all gonna die. And the only people that I see regularly masked up are the people who are actually out participating in direct action. And the people who aren't wearing masks are the people who just got to get to the goddamn Wendy's drive-thru.
To burn down said Wendy's, because that's what you're supposed to, you got to burn down the Wendy's. I'm not gonna,
I've heard that's a trend. I heard that's the new planking, or the new ice water challenge is to burn down the Wendy's challenge.
Burn down fast food restaurants. That is that's the best.
Pods. Don't eat Tide Pods. Just burn down Wendy's.
The best one I still saw up to now was definitely the imagine joining the National Guard to protect an Arby's, and it's we've seized the meats, y'all. Oh man. All right, y'all.
So speaking, you go.
No, you go. No.
All right. So I say, speaking of being exhausted, so Jan and Michael Antonio are here, and they have every right to be the most tired people in the room right now, because they have been the organizing force behind a sit-in in front of Memphis City Hall that has entered its 30th hour now. So you guys want to tell us what's going on?
Real quick.
It's really it's an occupation of the City Hall Plaza, and it's funny you all brought up the Wendy's because we actually were broadcasting the flaming Wendy's onto the side of City Hall last night. So we weren't literally burning it down, but it looked for a little bit like we were kind of burning it down. It was pretty incredible.
I do have to say real quick, Michael Antonio, your name is amazing. And as an Italian American, I wish I had your first name. I'm very, very jealous. If you want to switch, I'm totally down. I got this horrible waspy like first name, and I really want like a diehard Guinea name, and your name is amazing.
I appreciate it, my man. Thank you.
No problem.
But yeah, no, we are. It's been a ride. We weren't expecting it to go really as smoothly as it is. The cops didn't really mess with us as much as we thought they possibly would. They gave us some beef about the sidewalk chalk. Just like, what are you going to do, my guy?
What was the sidewalk chalk?
So we had decided to use the plaza as in front of City Hall. So just for geographical context, there's kind of like a entry. The only way into City Hall, unless you go through some weird garage, is through like the front door. And so in the plaza leading to the only entry point, the City Hall, we wrote the names of all of the people, as many as we could find, of people who had been killed by police or state violence, at the hands of police or state violence. And so we had a list of a good number of names, and we gave it up to folks and said, take sidewalk chalk and like, let's not forget. And so when people go into work at City Hall, our city councilors, the mayor and his staff, they either can walk by in apathy or reckon with the fact that they are participating in a system that leads to another name in that plaza, another hashtag, another life lost. So that's what the sidewalk chalk was when the cop came up and it was like, yo, cut that out. And Jan actually exchanged some words with the cop. Jan?
Yeah, I was going to weigh in there. So the officer pulled up and said, you can't write on the plaza with chalk. And I said, what's the ordinance that prohibits us from exercising our First Amendment right to free expression in a public forum like this? And I said, it's not doing any property damage. And he said, well, ma'am, I'm not here to argue with you, but you're just not allowed to write on the plaza. So he wouldn't cite me to an ordinance, and he couldn't give any kind of legal justification. Not that I thought an ordinance was going to, defeat the First Amendment protections that we have in a public forum. But so the most incredible thing I think so far was that after that kind of interaction, and then he said, well, I'm not here to argue with you, ma'am. He kind of backed up a little bit, and I don't know if he was consulting with whoever his higher ups are about what to do, but somebody grabbed the megaphone and started singing like Wade in the Water, but it was like Wade in the Plaza, which has come out of the Nashville occupation of Capitol Hill. So all these people were like standing over their chalk drawings and singing Wade in the Plaza. And then it got into another one of our comrades grabbed a mic and said that he started singing
We shall not be moved.
We shall not be moved. And everybody like put their feet about shoulder width apart and stood over the chalk drawings kind of at, ready stance. And everybody was singing We Shall Not Be Moved together at the cop. And so then they backed off, and we kind of just stood there singing at the cop for a while all together. I mean, people of all different ages and, different, good mix of ethnicities as well, all singing together, We Shall Not Be Moved in the plaza at the cop yesterday. And so they backed off and for the most part left us alone overnight. There were a couple of kind of intimidating things they did, but that was a pretty beautiful moment, standing over and protecting the names on the plaza and singing We Shall Not Be Moved in unison together at law enforcement.
Oh, I think
go ahead.
A weird quirk about that is that the cop that showed up wasn't like some rookie cop. Like, we're pretty sure it was a major. And we're like, you can't tell us what ordinance that you're supposed to be enforcing, and you got all them stripes on your arm? Like, what is this?
So what is the direct purpose behind this specific action of occupying that plaza?
We want our demands met. I mean, we're there until not there till he meets with us, like the joke of a meeting that he supposedly had today with some of our people that came in to relieve us after we left. He walked out and kind of made some quips, and it didn't look like he was taking anything seriously. But we're there until we get the 5 demands met. Hold on, I can pull them up unless Michael Antonio has them memorized.
Yeah, our 5 demands are, 1, defund MPD, 2, fund education, 3, I don't think this is the actual order, 3,
it is
fund housing and community services.
Development.
And where am I, 3 or 4?
4, invest in transit, and 5, invest in libraries. Yeah.
Yeah, and transit's a big one here because we have some raggedy ass roads for being such a major hub of all sorts of freight going through the United States. I think something around like 70% of all freight goes through Memphis, Tennessee. That goes through continental U.S. But yeah, the roads in the city are raggedy as fuck.
There's been some discussion about whether a mural on some of the streets, but people can't figure out where they could put it, that they wouldn't be painting around a bunch of potholes. I mean,
That is the truest
That sounds really
thing
familiar.
I've ever heard.
It's like the same problem we have here. Y'all, there's a lot of confusion around about like the term defunding the police. So could you all go into like more detail about what y'all mean by defunding the police, and if that ties into like what people are saying national? Because you have people that obviously conservatives who don't know what they're talking about saying like just every conspiracy theory under the sun. So could y'all just like go in a little bit more detail about like what it means for y'all to defund the police?
Yeah. So, first of all, we kind of have to like back up. And when we talk about the police, we're not talking about, the cliche blue bloods or, like protect and serve, helping little old ladies. Like the Americana idea of the police is not what we're talking about. We're talking about a modern institution that came from slave patrols and union busting and strike breaking. And so time and time again in Black history, police have, and then through union labor history, like police have been used as a cudgel of the state against common folks. And so when we're talking about defund the police, yeah, we want to reprioritize how we allocate city funding because, we have cops being sent to deal with situations that they're not equipped to handling, and people end up dead. You shouldn't be getting called because you fell asleep at a Wendy's and then you end up dead. That shouldn't be a thing. So when we say defunding the police, like, yeah, we're going to reallocate and reprioritize money towards like fixing our roads. And so if that's what is, and, prevent things that cause the police to be called in the first place. And so I think that if we look through that frame, then people can find it more palpable. But really we need to look towards a post-police ideas of public safety and how we protect our communities. But that has to begin with dealing with systematic issues like poverty. And so, sure, if y'all got problems with defund or reimagine or reprioritize or shift, whatever it is that makes people feel good about, participating in justice, then so be it. But like, let's be clear, like we're moving towards something beyond what's in place today.
Who is the mayor up there in Memphis, and where should people be putting the pressure on? The city council members, the mayor himself, or should people be calling the police chief?
So I actually worked on a mayoral campaign in the last mayoral race, so last year, he's the first African American mayor in Memphis' history. And the longest serving mayor in Memphis' history, Dr. Willie Harrington. But he was trying to win re-election, but that's a whole nother story. And so Strickland had been in office for 4 years after the mayor that came after Dr. Harrington, A.C. Wharton. He was the second Black mayor of Memphis. He served 1 term, I believe, Kate. Am I right?
Yeah, I moved. Yes, because
I think it was 1 term on city council.
Yeah, he was elected. He raided the animal shelter. Then he just went around and made speeches, giving weird analogies and wearing very sharp boots. And then Jim Strickland was elected mayor. That is not inaccurate. That's a very accurate description of 4 years of Memphis.
No, it's absolutely true. No, AC Wharton had this weird proclivity for like weird country anachronisms and idioms, like that dog won't hunt in Memphis, Tennessee, and it's like, what, my dude?
And take those ones, like take those that dog won't hunt, and turn them into like. I remember when he came, when he was the county mayor, he came and spoke to the University of Memphis College Democrats as a guest, and like people asked him like direct questions about county policy, and everything was just, that is a great question. And I know when I have a great question, the best way to go about finding the answer is to seek the wisdom of people beyond us. And that means my grandmama. And she always told me, if you put too much sugar in your pie, it'll look good, but no one will eat it. And it was like, that would be the end of the answer.
What the
You're so dumbfounded.
It just sounds like the foghorn leghorn, like the fucking chicken from Futurama. It's like, I'll say.
It's my
God.
But yeah, he's since been replaced by human sack of potatoes, Jim Strickland.
Yeah, Pothole Jim, as I fondly called him during the campaign.
Pothole Jim.
Because our roads are so raggedy. It's funny because it's an election year in Memphis, because that's when the city repair trucks come out and they start fixing the roads for like a good 3 months. And then as soon as the election's over, the trucks go away and the potholes stay.
And then one good solid rain and everything is washed away and the roads are even deeper.
Yeah.
I guess what I'm asking is, what can people from outside Memphis do to help or support y'all?
Well, I guess I honestly, just getting the word out about what's going on here. Because Memphis has an interesting history when it comes to like police brutality and racism. I mean, of course, we all know that Dr. King, was murdered in Memphis. So that's a big stain on our city. And, the Civil Rights Museum is a whole nother complicated issue. That's a topic for another day. But it's a powerful place regardless. And so, when we do, protests and marches, and it's usually centered around the Civil Rights Museum. But what's happening now is that we're trying to refocus attention on what city government isn't doing, what it could be doing, because there's a feeling in the city that if you've been here long enough, it feels like things are stuck in time. For some reason, things feel like, why isn't the city more our institutions are more progressive. And a part of the reason is because the charter that is in effect that governs, city institutions was codified the same year that Dr. King was killed, when it entered effect January 1st of that year. And that's why the city feels stuck. And so we're up against very deep and entrenched systems that, don't want to change. If they wanted to change, we wouldn't be here right now. And so I think for folks on the outside is sharing news about what's going on here. Because Memphis gets forgotten a little bit. It's all right, but like we need people to pay attention to what's going on here. Because there are things that, are happening in the city that are trying to deeply change the nature of the city. Like, for instance, Orange Mound is the oldest African American community in America, found in I believe 1890.
Yeah, I think that's where 8 Ball and MJG are from.
Yes, it is.
Oh, yeah, it is.
It is. What's your favorite color?
So yeah, and that came in the aftermath. The community was founded in the aftermath with the help of Robert Church, the first African American millionaire. After in the aftermath of the massacre of 1866, which in its uniqueness, along with the riots in New Orleans the same year, I believe it was in July, was the driving force behind radical Reconstruction. These two instances, and what was so wild about what happened in Memphis is that it was kind of the violence and the barbarism was spearheaded by the police. And so there's a long history of police tomfuckery in the city. You're
going to talk about the consent decree?
Oh God. And then we have, in the aftermath, of Dr. King getting killed, and like folks finding out that, the city is spying on people. The feds are like, yo, you can't be spying on people for political purposes. Like, absolutely not. And in 2012, I believe, the bridge protest, there, of course, have been like events going up, like popping off in the lead up to it. But when we shut down the main artery, one of the main arteries coming in and out of the city that, like I mentioned earlier, like 70% of all freight goes through Memphis, Tennessee, and continental U.S. So when that happens and you fuck up the logistics for like freight across not just across the country, but more than likely like across the world, like you're fucking up shit for like people in China. When you shut down I-40, you're fucking with the capitalist money when you shut down I-40 and I-55. So the state don't take too kindly to that. And in the aftermath of that, and the pressures that other organizations in the city were doing, like the Mid-South Peace and Justice Center, the organizations under its umbrella, we're doing to help people experiencing homelessness, teaching kids their rights and how to like interact with law enforcement, going through police internal, IAB investigations where they don't lead to anything. And then IAB is like, go to CLERB to like deal with if you got a problem with what this cop did, go to CLERB. And then you find out that CLERB was disbanded a couple of years ago. And it's like, okay, so you're telling me to take my problems with the police to avoid so all of these things.
CLERB?
CLERB is our Citizen Law Enforcement Review Board. It is
Eric Wright and I had talked about it a bit on that episode. The organization that was initially put together that was like majority it was all civilians, and it was mostly people with legal backgrounds. And then immediately after it was seated, they rewrote a new ordinance that ceded all power to it, directly to city council, and removed any subpoena power. So there was just no point in having it, and it was ultimately disbanded. And now, like, we have a clerk, but it's just city council.
Yeah. And so people who have been involved in all of this work had become a thorn in the city side. And Mayor Jim Strickland, old pothole Jim, and his police department, the city started creating a list of activists that if they showed up at City Hall, there's like either you can't come here, or like if you're here, you have to be have someone with you and escorted through the building.
Police escort.
Like a police escort. And this police department was using organized crimes and their crime stat, super high tech, DHS technology to network all these activists. And they were pulling social media posts. And they were following people and harassing people and being outside their house and all sorts of wild shit.
Wasn't it the die-in on Strickland's front lawn that resulted in the list?
Yeah,
2016.
Yeah, that was when things really Strickland had enough. And he's all you motherfuckers are going on a list. I ain't having this. You ain't showing up at my house. Yeah, and so that turned into the whole ACLU lawsuit.
And this is why he doesn't, to this day, still doesn't want to meet with real activists.
So what did he do with this list? What was this list used for?
Not just surveillance, but also to prohibit people from coming into city council unless they had a police escort. These are civilians. And if you were on the list, you couldn't go into city council without police escorting you in.
Is this a secret list? Does anyone even know if they're on the list? Do they just throw people on the list because they feel like it, or what?
I think it was secret until it came out in the litigation.
Yeah, it was secret until it came out in ACLU litigation.
So,
then, yeah.
I guess the next question is what happened with the ACLU litigation, because is this still an ongoing thing?
So the ACLU litigation, well, in 2018, that litigation started after the bridge protest in 2016. And all these activists in the course of that litigation ultimately realized that not only were they on a list, but also they'd been actively surveilled. So there were officers assigned to surveil specific activists. And so ultimately the result of that litigation was that the Kendrick consent decree, which dates back to 1978, was upheld, and it was found that the Memphis Police Department had been violating it. And so now we have a police monitor that is I don't know, overseeing the police. If we believe the police are spying on us at an action, we video and take photographs and get badge numbers and send it to the monitor. So there's actually a higher restriction on Memphis Police Department than there are on a lot of other police departments nationwide.
How much do you trust that monitor? And
they're independent, but I mean, what does that mean in Memphis?
I'm just thinking, what a waste of resources to have cops following around just activists for no crime, nothing.
For being a thorn in the side of the city, basically.
Right. This is why sometimes you'll see the sheriff will be monitoring what activists are doing instead of Memphis Police Department, because they pull up to an action and we start videoing them and saying, you're violating the consent decree. And they'll try to argue, but, we'll get a license plate or a badge number and say, what you're doing is illegal. And so they may just send in the sheriff's department sometimes to deal with it, because the Memphis Police Department have such a higher, not higher burden, barrier. They have a bigger barrier. William, is it William or William?
Well, it's Will. Call me Will.
Okay. So you actually asked a question earlier about what can people outside of Memphis do. Statewide, we really have to flip the Republican-controlled legislature, because they have done a number of things on a state level that have impacted what Memphis is allowed to do for itself to find unique solutions to address its own problems. For example, a few years ago, our city actually decided that we were going to decriminalize marijuana.
Mhm.
What was it, under an ounce?
Yeah, under an ounce, like nothing more than like a misdemeanor.
But the state legislature decided that we didn't have that power to do that.
Even though under the Tennessee Constitution, there's the Home Rule Amendment that allows basically a city of a certain size, you can do whatever the fuck you want as long as it doesn't violate the Tennessee Constitution. And so like, yeah, it's very clear that, you know, Nashville is like absolutely not Memphis.
They're
small government.
We're the
Y'all got
What's the balance of the state legislature now?
I'm sorry, what?
What's the balance of the state legislature now? I mean, obviously it's Republican controlled, but how big is that margin?
I believe
it's a super majority. There's only, I want to say, in the Senate, we only have 6 Democrats.
And almost all of them are from Memphis.
Yeah.
I'm still shocked that y'all have home rule. We ain't got that shit.
Most of them not even leftists. Like, we've got a lot of work to do, not just to flip it from Republican to Democrat, but to get the Democrats to be less moderate and complacent.
We need less shoot them in the leg Democrats.
Oh God. Another thing that happened in the last year or so is the vouchers. The school voucher program bill, the voucher bill was passed, and it exempted only Shelby County and Davidson County. Like, it didn't even affect all of the rural counties where all these, good old boy Republicans are from. The voucher bill only applies to Davidson County and Shelby County. So again, they're fucking with us and saying you can't decide what's best for you. We're gonna impose rules that mostly affect you and not anybody else.
Yeah, Nashville has a history of doing that, just being like, fuck you, Memphis.
We've seen that recently with Montgomery trying to pass its own city taxes, even where the state, where Birmingham and Huntsville had passed theirs before in Mobile, the state is coming through and saying they can't do it. I know how you feel. It's frustrating to hear this from the state's rights people, that you would think they'd be in favor of government, more control at the local level, but the hypocrisy, it never ceases to amaze me.
It's interesting how they tend to do that to the towns that are majority populated by people of color, to try to, so it's almost like there's a pattern to it there. What role does DSA have in petitioning local governments, in trying to affect structural change at the state level? Like, what are you all doing, like, as an organization in that capacity?
One of the things that we've been doing as a chapter is putting boots on the ground for progressive candidates, candidates that fit our values. We have an endorsement process, and we do get involved in electoral work. So we'll canvass and phone bank locally for candidates to try to help flip seats or turn a liberal seat more leftist. And we're in the endorsement process now. For the August primary, we actually have some solid candidates. And last year for city council, we got a pretty good progressive elected to city council in a runoff that was a progressive led movement, and DSA was part of that. We put a lot of boots on the ground for her. Phone banked, but she was one of our endorsed candidates and was elected to city council, in part because of the help of several organizations, but DSA was definitely one of those. Do you want to take the rest of this, Michael Antonio?
Yeah. By the way, as far as the state legislature is concerned, and Jan mentioned about, moving, centrist Dems, or even Dems that, I guess you might colloquially be known as like blue dog Dems, or Democrats who just like to hang out with Republicans. Jan was actually pretty important in an effort to get one of these type of Democrats off the Democratic ballot. She actually, I won't even, Jan, please let them know the awesome work that you did.
No, so they're talking about, he's talking about John DeBerry. John DeBerry was actually the deciding vote on the voucher bill that fucked us. And John DeBerry is a Democrat in name only. He's a black Democrat, but only because there's a D by his name. And he's been voting with the Republicans for a long time on issues of reproductive justice. And, he's pro-life. And he's always, justified that with saying, well, that's a religious thing. And so I think he's kind of gotten a pass from local Democrats because they're like, well, he's voting his conscience. He votes with us on other stuff. He's a good Democrat, whatever. But then he cast the deciding vote on the voucher bill last year. And had he not voted for it, it wouldn't have passed. And it wouldn't have fucked our school system the way it did. So that sparked outrage. I mean, in addition to that, he's also, wildly homophobic. And so there was a lot of the gay community that was not supportive of him either. But I've been a constituent of his in his district for 12 of the 14 years that I've lived in Memphis. And so I filed a ballot challenge this time around on April 1st, challenging his status as a Democrat, and asked the executive committee of the Democratic Party here in Tennessee to decertify him. And it passed 41-18. They voted to decertify him. And we called in a lot of favors. There were people making calls from Planned Parenthood. There were people making calls from different LGBTQ organizations. I think Tennessee Equality Project was one of those. WTF, which is a women's teacher foundation, I think was also making calls. But we also had 3 different DSA chapters statewide making calls, asking the executive committee to decertify DeBerry as a Democrat. And they did vote to do that. He appealed and lost the appeal as well by almost as wide of a margin. So here's some more tomfuckery, is some of his Republican buddies on the legislature, because he's been voting for all this stuff that they support, actually sponsored a bill to allow him to file late to run as an independent, even though the deadline is already passed. And they said, oh, well, he's a friend of ours, and so it's not fair what they've done to him. And if they're going to decertify him as a Democrat, he should be allowed to run as an independent. And unfortunately, that has now passed because we have a supermajority Republican-controlled legislature. So now this guy that the Democrats have just decertified and would not be allowed to run on the Democratic ballot is going to be in the general election as an independent.
What seat is he running for?
Because the Republicans supported it. Sorry, what?
What seat is he running for?
Tennessee House 90. But he's the incumbent. And so the bill only applies to incumbents. It's retroactive to include him.
But designed around him.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I don't even think they're not even shy about it. They're very clear on, yes, he's our friend and it's not fair what they did to him. He's an incumbent and he got decertified by his own party. So the Republican-controlled legislature has now passed a bill to allow this, quote, Democrat to run as an independent after the filing deadline because they needed his votes. So, it goes to show that what we were saying all along was true, that he's not a real Democrat. Not only does he give money to Republican candidates, but he also votes with them consistently, takes money from Republican funding PACs, And, you know, what's crazy is we had Memphis Democrats defending him.
Sounds like Black Joe Manchin.
I love
It is.
Southern politics.
It is.
Like Southern state politics is the greatest fucking thing ever because every state has a clusterfuck like that. It is, oh my God. Alabama has had a number of them too.
It's a kaleidoscope of profoundly weird people the closer you look at America.
So we rarely have like well contested races in the Tennessee State House. Is there a viable Republican primary for Tennessee District 90?
There's no Republican running. They weren't running anybody against DeBerry because he was the Republican. He was
There
just
you
running as
have
a
it.
Democrat.
There it is.
There's 3 Black Democrats running in the Democratic primary now that he's been removed from. I mean, they were running anyway. They'd already filed their petitions and submitted their signatures. So there's 3 Black Democrats that are running for that seat that where he's the incumbent for since 1992 or 94.
Yeah, something like that.
I don't remember a world without John.
It's like 14 terms or something. I mean, since I was 10 or 11 years old.
He's been there a while. I just want to point out too, like, let's be clear, like, because of the action taken by the Tennessee Democratic Party Executive Committee, like, DeBerry was done. Like, that's it. It's a wrap. But because of Republican action, now he ends up on the ballot in November as an independent. Like, they literally
not only that, but in the last primary in 2018, one of the people who's running now, Tory Harris, ran against him in 2018, and a large number, I think 4,000 and some change, voters in this district crossed over and voted in the Democratic primary. Republican voters, like traditionally Republican voters, based on their voting record and their volunteer efforts. And, you know, they're scored that way based on criteria, crossed over and voted for DeBerry against Harris in the Democratic primary. So
is there a chance that a Democrat could beat him since he's going to be an independent and you have a Democrat and there's no Republican? Or do you think
that
it's crossover?
It's quite possible.
That is a possibility. But I mean, it's easier, I think, to win in a general as an independent than to run as a write-in candidate, which is the place where he was before.
Yeah, definitely.
Additionally, there's the added factor there too of just name recognition on the ballot, where you know a lot of people who are walking in every time they voted, they've seen his name before, and so they see his name and they're not going to see the letter I next to it, and you know that's symptomatic everywhere. So you guys said that there was there was a pretty like coalesced effort across the state to decertify John DeBerry, and that other DSA chapters were involved in this. And I know that since the pandemic has started, a cat just fell out of my lap with claws. I'm sorry. That DSA nationally has seen a huge surge in membership. Is that same feeling being seen in the South? Like, what is it like to be a very openly declared socialist in the South, since everyone seems to think that socialism is still a dirty word right now?
That's a multifaceted question. On some level, it's really misunderstood. So I think certain Democrats are coming around to understanding that we're not completely against everything that they stand for. And they see us as an ally on at least some issues. The conservatives are going to call you a socialist no matter how much of a moderate Democrat you are. So it's just a slur word for them. But I don't know. I think people are starting to take us seriously, like with the DeBerry thing. That scored us some points with a lot of people, and they realized, you know, we're out there doing it, you know. Yeah. The action yesterday, the fact that we were actually successful in an 18-hour protest, and which nobody thought could be done. I mean, yesterday morning at 9 or 10 o'clock, people were like, there's no way you're going to pull this off. You're going to have mass arrests, injuries, all your stuff's going to be broken. But, you know, the DSA had set up this action at City Hall, and we put it as a 3 to 6 p.m. kind of speaking in front of City Hall thing. And when we arrived, we said, welcome to the occupation. And then it went out on a text blast to 2,000 people to tell them, hey, this is not a 3 to 6 p.m. event. Show up, prepared to stay all night because we're going to occupy. And people are kind of seeing, sorry?
Oh, I'm sorry, about the numbers and the atmosphere there?
Last night, I believe, you know, at peak, I would say last night we had about a good 250 people. Kate was out there as well.
Yeah, I'll say on atmosphere, it's the kind of environment where, like, you know, everyone, it's like if people are smoking a cigarette, they walk over to the edge without being asked to, like, make sure that everything is comfortable. You know, are very respectful of each other. You know, there's food available that's being served in a safe manner. Sorry, everybody's wearing a mask. Loved. There's safety things available. There was live music. There was spoken word. I mean, there was a moment last night where I was like dancing with Michael Antonio's partner to Nuck If You Buck while simultaneously on my phone ordering 4 boxes of vegan pancake mix from a Black-owned business. Like that's what it's like here. Like it's fun. Like honestly, like there's like such a positive energy like surrounding it to where it's like even the couple of tense moments that happen, everyone is very conscious of making sure that everyone is safe and then redirecting it back to a more positive focus, but from a sincere, not from a very sincere space of still like staying on message throughout the entire thing.
What advice could you give to like people that want to perform this action in their own town? I know that like the widespread unrest is almost more widespread than 1968. You see this happen in a lot of small places. What can people do to follow your example?
Be sneaky about it. Don't let them see it coming. Announce one thing and then quietly leak it to everybody and say, hey, we put this thing out here, but that's not what we're doing. Like, just so you know. And I think there's something to be said for the secrecy of it, because it was kind of a wink, wink. Hey, only tell your friends. But they're going to tell their closest 100 friends. And those people are going to tell, you know, the dozen people that they know aren't law enforcement. And so they're like, hey, DSA is doing this thing. And it says 3 to 6. And that's the start time. But that's just the beginning. But, the DeBerry ballot challenge was the same way. I filed it the day before the noon deadline to file as an independent. So he had less than 12 hours, even if he'd known, or no, less than, I think it was like 5 p.m. on April 1st, and noon the next day was the deadline to file as an independent. Were he going to do it? So he didn't see it coming. He had no idea. And so, you know, there's some things that you can do that you don't have to be great at, but if they don't see you coming, they don't have their guard up. So, you know, with 3 o'clock yesterday, we show up and we start unpacking a bunch of cars and just piling shit on the curb. There's tables, there's tents, there's boxes of hand sanitizer and masks and markers and chalk. And all the news media is set up and they're like, I'm sorry, ma'am, where's your schedule? And I'm like, what do you mean? They said, well, when does this start? And they're all looking at their watches nervously. I said, you know, it's already started. You're looking at it. This is what we're doing. And they couldn't grasp what are these people doing? We're just setting up. We're struggling to set up this giant canopy tent. And I was like, hey, does anybody know how to camp? Because I don't know how to set this up. So the whole crowd just comes over and people are like, oh, I like camping. And so they help us set up this big tent right in front of the news media. And they're like, what's happening here? Because they thought they were coming to see some speakers talk about demanding action at City Hall and our 5 demands. And so we slowly, but as a community, set up this giant tent right in front of news media, and then started piling out like sleeping bags and camping chairs. And they're like, when is this going to get started? I'm like, you're already seeing it. This is what we're doing. And then we had all these banners rolled up on the sidewalk and a bunch of Black Lives Matter signs from an action the night before that we somehow just acquired. And so we just grabbed the crowd and said, hey, you guys want to help us put up some banners and signs? And they're like, sure. So I'm like, here's 1,000 zip ties. So within 3 minutes, all of a sudden, whoop, the whole front of City Hall fence is covered in signs. And the media is like, what is it that's happening here? Because the speakers didn't start till probably 4:30.
It was about 4:30.
And they're all wringing their hands thinking that there's nothing to be filming. But it started at 3 o'clock when we started piling shit on the curb. And then the whole, because socialists take way longer than they ever think that they're going to take to do something. Which is why we're all here at 10 o'clock at night. But, we all do it as a community together. So everybody was sitting around and they're like, oh, you need help setting up? Oh, you need help carrying all these chairs? You need help carrying signs and putting them up? So they were watching socialism just unroll onto the curb. And they didn't know. And so they were confused. They thought they were there to speak, to film some speakers. But we just pulled like a giant socialist prank on all the news media in City Hall because they thought we were just throwing some shit on the curb for some speakers. But we set up a little mini tent city while they're waiting on, they're checking their watches, waiting on when it's going to start.
It's like the socialist version of Punk'd. Like you're just waiting for who would be the left-wing Ashton Kutcher? Just comes out of nowhere. It's like, gotcha.
Yeah, that's incredible.
Don't see you coming. Just be sneaky about it.
ComSec is really important. You need to have people you trust when you're doing actions. You need to have a circle, a community of folks that you trust. And this is something that our chapter has been working towards. Is facilitating trusted spaces between networks of people across the activist community. Memphis here, we got a strong pull-up game in Memphis. And we're trying to make sure that, we strengthen these networks, we strengthen these bonds. Because at the end of the day, we're building we're building a society past what we have right now. And the formation of that society, the roots, the basis of that society is going to be these bonds that we build through these exigent times. And so DSA is, our chapter specifically, is looking to help facilitate building these bonds and strengthening these bonds and creating spaces like Memphis occupied, City Hall Plaza. And for all the organizations, there's a lot of great organizations in the city that are doing a lot of good work. And so we want to make sure that work is done. That's what we're all about here.
But in the course of what we did last night, these were not specific goals. We set it up as a trial run occupation, thinking that we might very probably fail and get kicked out and arrested by 10 or 11 p.m. And if so, but we brought people together and showed them a different way of thinking about things, it was going to be a success, right? We didn't have to stay there till 9 a.m. That was our internal goal. But if we succeeded, well, it didn't matter if we succeeded or we failed in staying until 9 a.m. If we failed in that regard, then we've drawn out intelligence about what the police are going to do to respond to an action like that, an occupation action like that, similar, in the future. So we knew going into it, we have a high probability of failure, but we also have a high probability of demonstrating a different way of looking at the world. So some of the non-intentional, but very real objectives and things that happened as a natural result of what we were doing, right? We ended up feeding a lot of people that are living on the streets. We ended up distributing hand sanitizer to a lot of people that live on the streets. We ended up feeding people that sometimes are our allies in some issues and some are not. So we built relationships with people that, that will lead to future coalition work, because a lot of other people showed up to this event, not DSA. The people from the Memphis Poor People's Campaign, people from Black Lives Matter. There were a lot of different groups represented there last night. And they kept coming by and saying, this is a really beautiful thing that you've done to kind of show what the world could be if everything were different. were all just writing names on the plaza together, and people were making art and music together, and people were communing with each other and eating for free. I mean, anybody that walked up was eating chicken wings from a Black-owned business, or hot dogs and hamburgers that were being grilled by people who weren't asked to do it. They just showed up and volunteered to do it. They came to the action thinking they were going to hear some speakers from 3 to 6 p.m. And then like, oh, you need some help running the grill? Cool, we'll do it. So people were just walking up off the street like, hey, what's going on? And everybody ate. There was nothing being sold. Hand sanitizer was given for free. Bottled water, drinks, free. Snacks, free. What other stuff did we have out there? I feel like there were little packets for the homeless.
Yeah, there was sanitation, like toothbrushes and toothpaste, hand sanitizer bottles.
And people just kept showing up and bringing stuff. A pizza parlor donated some things and just showed up and brought it. People would show up to the plaza and say, hey, what do y'all need? And then the marshals that we had gotten to kind of guard the action and look out for law enforcement, they said, hey, if we're going to be here all night, we're going to need coffee. Somebody walked up and said, oh, they need coffee? All right, I'll go buy it. And they just came back with a whole bunch of boxes of coffee. So it showed Memphis what our vision of the world is. So even if we'd gotten shut down at 10 or 11 o'clock, it would have been a complete success regardless. All the bands performed for free because they wanted to be there. And a lot of them had socialist or fuck the police kind of messages, including one performance that while the guy was singing, Action Cat performed, and you know, they're comrades of ours. But while one guy was playing, another guy actually dressed up as a pig, a cop pig with like glasses and a bat, and came and started beating him and kicking him on the ground. So they did like street theater at the end of their performance. And then the singer threw a pie in the pig cop's face, and everybody starts booing the pig cop. But it was a little slice of like, here's what the world could be like if we would re-envision it. So it was already a success by 9 or 10 o'clock, even if the police arrested all of us or kicked us out. I'm pretty excited about this, if you can't tell.
Yeah, it's been crazy, you know, and it was really something beautiful to like watch all these folks come together. And it's I think it portends a great number of good things. But you know, we just need help getting the word out. And I think to see it organically, I think the biggest surprise was like, you know, around 2 o'clock this afternoon, seeing how organically it started coming together. Like folks, you know, all of a sudden you had like 40 something people, you know, coordinating supply logistics. And now tonight, you know, it's out there, you know, happening on its own. And I think this is something that's possible anywhere. And it just takes, you know, like we said, you know, having trusted folks that you're going to organize with, having comm security, building spaces and facilitating spaces, because, you know, we're moving into a time where there are going to be fewer safe spaces. So we need to be safe people in this new future that we're trying to build. And so I think that's something for people to take away what we're trying to do in Memphis, Tennessee.
So for people in Memphis, Shelby County, Mid-South area, where can they get in touch with you? And if they're outside of like our specific region, where can they find like their local DSA chapter?
So we have a number of ways you can find us. We have Memphis-Midsouth DSA has a Facebook page that we took from like 3,000 views a month to at one point we were at 7 million views in a month over the course of last year. That's a very easy way to find us in any events that we're doing publicly. We also have a Twitter account that is pretty decent. I don't run it, but we have a social media coordinator named Barris who runs that. I've trailed off. This is bad. Oh, DSAUSA.org/join is where anybody that wants to join, you join the national organization online, and they will assign you to the nearest chapter. So even if they didn't know there was a Memphis chapter, DSAUSA.org/join is where they can go. And I mean, DSAUSA.org, they can read about anything in the DSA, but you'll get assigned to a chapter when you put your address in and join. Anything else?
Yeah, we're organizing in Montgomery a DSA chapter, so that's awesome. We get on Twitter. If you want to find a DSA chapter on Twitter, just find some third worldist that will call you a social fascist, and then you'll find a DSA chapter because that's basically the discourse.
Well, I hope you see your ranks swell by great example that you all have put out there. Thank you very much for what you've done.
Yeah, y'all, this is awesome. Thank you so much.
Yeah, keep it up. Keep it up.
Thank y'all for having us. We really
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, no problem, yo. Like before I do the outro, any last things, shout outs, anything you want to say? Fuck police.
Shout out to A-Ball and MJG.
Academy Award winners.
Memphis Kings.
Shout out to 3-6. Yeah. Like, people can't discount that 3-6.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
So when you're organizing, know
Project
your friend
Pat.
from the foe.
Project Pat. All right,
Did I ever
y'all.
tell y'all about the time Project Pat bought me lunch?
No, you literally are. Oh my God, you were about that. We were about to end the episode, and
we're gonna. And then everyone had cliffhanger, bitches.
No.
Cliffhanger,
no,
bitches.
my God, we have to wait until never to hear this. So, like, come on.
I'll tell y'all later.
No, we'll save it for we'll save it
Pat
for
bought me
Monday.
lunch.
All
It
right.
was fine.
We'll save it for the episode on Monday. We have a special guest interview coming on Monday.
Solidarity, y'all.
Solidarity.
Y'all.
All right, y'all. Dixieland of the proletariat. We believe the South will rise again, but this time for the right reasons, those being worker-owned means of production, decolonization, and self-determination for all oppressed peoples. We're coming to you from the heart of Dixie, Montgomery, Alabama. We'd also like to recognize we're recording on occupied land that rightfully belongs to Muskogee, Chickasaw, and their people. Thank you, Memphis-Midsouth DSA. Y'all are awesome. And as Tyler would say if he was here, good Lord willing, the creek don't rise. See y'all next time.